Right, today our lesson is to be able to write the equation of a line given a point and a slope. Today we're going to introduce the idea of the point-slope form. You can write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form when you know the slope and you know the y-intercept. You can write an equation of a line in point-slope form when you're given the slope and you're given the coordinates of a point on the line that is not the y-intercept. When we write an equation in point-slope form, we start with our slope formula, and we divide, so we have y minus y1 is going to be equal to m times x minus x1. Point-slope form means we take a point, x1 and y1, and we write the equation using that form. All right? So when we look at the lesson throughout the chapter, we should be able to write a linear equation from point-slope form, right? If we substitute the slope m and the coordinates of a point into the point-slope form, we should be able to write a linear equation in slope-intercept form, where we substitute the slope m and the y-intercept b and y equals mx plus b. We should be able to write a linear equation from a graph. If we find the y-intercept and the slope, then we substitute the slope and the y-intercept in y equals mx plus b. We should be able to write a linear equation from 2 points using the coordinates of the points to find the slope, and then we substitute the slope and the coordinates of one of the points into y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we should also be able to write a linear equation from a table. All right? The idea being, based on the information we're given, we should be able to write a linear equation in various forms. Okay, so let's start with point-slope form. Point-slope form looks like the following. All right, we start with our point-slope form, which says we take y minus y1. That's going to be equal to m parentheses x minus x1. All right, I'm going to identify the ordered pair as x1 and y1, and then simply use substitution. All right, so we'd have y minus y1, which is 2, is going to be equal to our slope, which is negative 4, times x minus x1, which is 1. All right. Next, we have 7, 0 is our point. Our slope's going to be 1. Once again, I start with my formula. My formula says y minus y1 is equal to m parentheses x minus x1. I substitute by replacing x1 and y1 in the formula. So we have y minus y1 is 0 is equal to our slope, which is 1, times x minus x1, which is 7. Then our last example, x1 and y1. Write our formula. Y minus y1 is going to be equal to m times x minus x1. We substitute our values, so we take y, take away negative 5 because y1 is negative 5. That's going to be equal to our slope, which is negative 3/4, times x minus x1, which is going to be the negative 8. We want to simplify this, so that's going to be y plus 5 when we simplify it. It's going to be equal to negative 3/4 times x plus 8. All right? So that's how we would write an equation in point-slope form if we're given a point and we're given a slope. Okay? All right, let's continue. We want to write an equation in point-slope form for the line that passes through that point and the slope. So we're going to continue with the same process. I always like to write my formula. Y minus y1 is equal to m parentheses x minus x1. This is my x1, this is my y1. So we have y minus 3. It's going to be equal to our slope of 4, x minus the negative 2. We simplify that. Y minus 3 is going to be equal to 4 parentheses x plus 2. Now we're asked to write the slope-intercept form, all right, of that same line that passes through negative 2 comma 3 and it has a slope of 4. So we start with our point slope form, so I'm going to write that. y minus 3 is equal to 4 times x plus x2. We have to use our distributive property, and we have to solve that equation for y. So I'm going to start with my distributive property. Y minus 3 is going to be equal to 4x plus 8. Then I'm going to have to add 3 to both sides of that equation, and we're left with y is equal to 4x plus 11. So y is equal to 4 times the number x plus 11 is the equation of the same line that we have in example 1, but in slope-intercept form. All right? Okay. Write in slope-intercept form of an equation of a line that passes through those 2 points. So if I have to write it in slope-intercept form, first I'm going to start with my point-slope form. All right? So if I start with my point-slope form, I'm going to start with y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. I choose either one of these ordered pairs, so I'm going to choose this ordered pair as my x1 and y1. So that's going to be y minus 4. It's going to be equal, whoops, I didn't find my slope yet, so I have to do that first, right? Because in order to use the equation, right, I have to find the slope. So step number 1 should be finding the slope. So let's start with that. M is going to be equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, right? Because I can't use my point-slope formula or my slope-intercept formula for that matter without the slope. So this is going to be my x2, my y2. So I substitute y2 minus y1. It's going to be negative 2 minus 4 over x2 minus x1, 5 minus 2. We get negative 6 in the numerator, 3 in the denominator. So m is going to be equal to negative 6 over 3. Negative 6 over 3, we get a slope of negative 2. So my m is going to be negative 2, and then x minus x1, that's going to be x minus 2, because I'm using that first ordered pair. I use the distributive property, so we get y minus 4 is going to be equal to negative 2x plus 4. Solve that equation for y, so we're adding 4 to both sides of the equation. That's 0, and we get y is equal to negative 2x plus 8. Now, that's using the point-slope form. We learned earlier in the chapter that we can take 2 points and use slope-intercept form to write the equation in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to do that over here, right? So that starts with y equals mx plus b. And we should get the same equation, right? So I'm going to use same ordered pair, but I could use either ordered pair. So you know what? Let's use the other ordered pair, because I still should get the same equation in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to replace y with negative 2, because I'm using the other ordered pair, is equal to my slope, which is negative 2. My x value is 5 plus b. So we get negative 2 is equal to negative 2 times 5. That's going to be negative 10 plus b. Solve that equation for b by adding 10 to both sides of the equation, right? And I get 8 is equal to b. So I have an m of negative 2, I have a b of 8, right? And that's what we see in this equation, right? Y is going to be equal to negative 2 times x plus 8, right? So I get the same equation of a line whether I use the slope-intercept form or whether I use the point-slope form, and then rewrite the point-slope form in slope-intercept form. Right? And that's essentially, what we're working on today. We want to be able to do that each and every time. All right, so let's see, which problems do we want to do? Let's do one more, right? So I'm going to do this example here. Write the equation in point-slope form and slope-intercept form. So let's do that. First, let's start with the point-slope form. It's going to be my x1 and y1, going to be my x2 and y2. And I do that so that I don't mix up my points, and I do my substitution step correctly. So step 1, point-slope form, I write the formula. So that's going to be, step 1, find the slope. I almost made the same mistake I did before. All right, so if we find the slope, that's going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We want to find the slope first. Once we find the slope, let's see, that's going to be what? y2 minus y1 is going to be 9 minus 1 in the numerator. In the denominator, negative 2 minus 8. That's going to be 8 over, what's that, negative 10. So we wind up with negative 4/5 as our slope. So if I'm using point slope form now, I choose one of the points. I'll choose this first point. I write my formula. So that's going to be y minus y1 is equal to my m times x minus x1. I substitute. Y minus my y1 is going to be 1. So that's y minus 1 is equal to my slope, which is negative 4/5. Parentheses x minus x1. X minus my x1 is going to be 8. So there's my equation in point slope form. But now we're asked to, I already did step 2 here. So now we're asked to rewrite that in slope-intercept form. So if I want to do slope-intercept form, I have to take my y minus 1 is equal to negative 4/5, x minus 8, and I'm going to write that in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form, we'd have to do the distributive property first. Y minus 1 is equal to negative 4/5 times x minus, well, what's that? 4 times 8 is 32. 32 over 5. But negative times negative is positive, right? Negative times negative is positive, negative 4/5. So I have that. But then we have to add 1 to both sides of this equation. So add 1 here, because I have to solve for y. Add 1 here, solve for y. So now we're left with, that's going to be 0. We're left with y is equal to negative 4/5 x. When I add 1 to 32 over 5, that's going to be 5 over 5. So 32 over 5 plus 5 over 5 is going to be 37 over 5. So here's my equation in slope-intercept form. All right? All right, let's do a couple more. All right? Step number 1, we find the slope. So m is going to be equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Right? Step 1, find the slope. x1, y1, x2, y2. Find the slope. y2 minus y1, negative 3 minus 0 over 6 minus 3. Winds up being negative 3 over 3. So my slope is negative 1. So now we use our point slope form. So I'm going to write parentheses y minus y1 is equal to my m times x minus x1. Substitute. Y minus my y1 is 0. That's going to be equal to my slope, which is negative 1, times my x value, x minus x1, which is going to be 3. And there's my equation in point slope form. Right? So that's half my answer, my equation in point slope form. Now I want to write that in slope-intercept form. So we're going to have to distribute to put it in slope-intercept form. Y minus 0 is going to be equal to the opposite of x plus 3. We simplify that. Y equals the opposite x plus 3. There's my equation in slope-intercept form. Right? And we'll just do one more of these. Right? Step number 1, we find the slope. So m is going to be equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Here's our x1, here's our y1, here is our x2, there's our y2. Substitute. Y2 minus y1 is going to be negative 10 minus 2 over, what's that, 5 minus negative 1. This winds up being what? Negative 12 over, at the opposite, 6. So we get a slope of negative 2. Next, we write our point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We substitute. Y minus 2, because I'm using that first order pair. My slope's negative 2. X minus the negative 1. I want to simplify the right side there, so we get y minus 2. It's going to be equal to negative 2. Parentheses, what's that? X plus 1. All right, so there's my equation in point slope form. I want to write that now in slope-intercept form, so I'm going to have to distribute over here. So we get y minus 2. It's going to be equal to negative 2x minus 2. And we solved that equation for y, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides of that equation. That's going to be 0. We're left with y is equal to negative 2x. And it looks like my y-intercept then, positive 2, negative 2, that's going to be 0. So it looks like my equation should be y is equal to negative 2 times x in slope-intercept form. All right? Now I'm going to just do one last problem here where we have the data in a table and we're asked to do the following. Write an equation in point-slope form for the cost, find the slope of the line, then use the slope in one point to write the equation. Slope here. Change in y is what? 165, 75, 85. So what's that? 220, 125? 125 is my change in y. I find my change in x, which is 5. So first I find the slope, which we're going to use the change in y over change in x, the ratio of the change in y to change in x. So that's going to be 125 was my change in y. My change in x is 5. All right, so that simplifies to a slope of 25. Using my point slope form, right, I'm going to have y minus y1 is going to be equal to my m times x minus x1. I'm going to take one of these ordered pairs. There's an x value. These are my y values. So I'll take that first order pair. Y minus my y1, which is 165. It's going to be equal to my slope, which is 25, times x minus my x1 is going to be 5. So there's my equation from the table in point slope form. All right, and we'll do this last one. All right, I'm looking for my change in y, which is 10. My change in x here is, what's that, 50. So my slope, my m is going to be equal to the ratio of the change in y to the change in x, which is going to be 10 over 50, which simplifies to 1/5. And then I use my point slope form. Y minus y1 is going to be equal to m times x minus x1. Right? These are my x values. These are my y values. So I'm going to replace x and y. So this is going to be y minus. My y value here is 25. That's going to be equal to my slope. My slope we said is 1/5. Oops. 1/5. And x minus x1 is going to be 100. So there's your equation in point slope form. All right. That's going to be the end of the lesson. And